A stunning new statistic last month from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. More than 100,000 people died of drug overdoses in the U.S. in just a 12-month period that ended last April. The driving cause? The opioid crisis, with synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl, causing nearly two-thirds of those deaths. Now, as LA Times crime reporter Richard Winton wrote, there are calls to prosecute drug dealers for murder. Richard joined us along with Amy Neville of Orange County, who tragically lost her son to the epidemic. Richard, I'm going to begin with you. Tell everyone how this opioid crisis has expanded and deepened since it first began at the beginning of the 2000s.
Well, in the beginning of 2000s, we were basically talking about small numbers of cases, small numbers, very small numbers. There's one number which is really reflects in Southern California and very quickly. In 2017, Riverside County had 2 deaths related to fentanyl. By the end of this year, they may have 600 for this year alone. That gives you the idea of the expansion and how rapidly this problem has evolved.
And remind everybody how deadly this is and where it's found.
I mean, it reaches into every potential home because many of these cases, many of these deaths relate to a single pill, often a black market pill of something like ADHD medication, something, like just a calming medicine. People think they're buying one thing, but fentanyl is now turning up in almost anything. And the smallest, literally a pinprick of fentanyl can be fatal. And so therefore, the potential deadly effect here is off the scale. We're not talking about your traditional drug issue, and it's limited to, people taking heroin. People think of a certain type of person. This is reaching into everyone who potentially could be buying even anything which isn't coming directly from their doctor, basically could have fentanyl in.
Amy, your family was a victim of fentanyl, living in Aliso Viejo, raising your son, Alexander. Tell us what happened.
So Alexander was pretty much a typical 14-year-old, loved to skateboard, would fight with his sister, was very close with his grandmother. But one of Alexander's outstanding personality traits was the fact that he was deeply curious about the world around him, starting from a very young age. He would learn about things intensely and share that information with others. He loved American history. Unfortunately, drugs were no different. He had a deep curiosity about wanting to experiment. And unfortunately, during the pandemic, boredom set in, and he reached out through a dealer through social media and was able to quickly receive something. And that pill took his life. He was only 14 years old. He took a pill one night, and I found him on the floor of his bedroom the following morning. Unfortunately, Alex is not some exception. He is the rule these days. Thousands of kids are dying this way. Social media normalizes this epidemic.
Richard, there is a movement now that's growing among prosecutors who say that the people who supply these drugs should be prosecuted for these deaths and charged with murder.
Yes, I mean, what we're seeing in Southern California and we're seeing across the country is the prosecutors are stepping up and deciding, if you are a drug dealer and you deal these drugs and they have fentanyl and there are deaths, we will come after you and we will basically make you pay for it with a murder charge. Now, Riverside County pioneered a lot of this. They've already filed 7 murder cases in Riverside. Mike Hestron, the DA there, has basically sought out to prove that there was a second-degree murder in most of these cases of negligence, where they should have known or knew that they were perhaps selling drugs which had fentanyl in, and they knew what fentanyl could do. Now, in Orange County, Todd Spitzer is trying to move this, he hasn't filed a murder case yet, but he's seeking to move that slightly more. He's actually expanding it beyond fentanyl, but what he's doing is interesting. He's decided he wants to put drug dealers on notice. So when they get charged in their case and convicted, he's making them sign basically a waiver which says, hey, I know fentanyl's dangerous. I know these drugs are dangerous and they may kill. So the next time they're busted or someone dies, they can then use that. And it's basically built upon the idea that they're using drunk driving, which is essentially you go on a drunk driving course once you're convicted. And so if you have a second offense where something happens, like someone gets killed, you can actually use that as prior knowledge. They know, therefore they're negligent.
Amy, you found out after Alexander's death that the dealer who provided him that one pill that took his life also provided drugs to two others who died.
So shortly before Alexander died, another young man died in the dealer's apartment right in front of the dealer. So when this dealer sold to Alex, he knew that his drugs were deadly. He saw it firsthand. And then once Alex died, about a week and a half later, he sold to another young man named Hector, who also passed away. And those are the three that I can connect right now. And there's been several others in our area. I've been working on connecting those dots as quickly as possible to hopefully get this guy off the streets.
Amy, our LA County DA George Gascon has said that he is not going to follow suit and follow this movement to charge these drug dealers with murder. What do you say to DAs who won't?
I think it's important that we definitely hold these dealers accountable, especially in these cases where there's multiple deaths linked to them when they know their pills are deadly. So there has to be a line in the sand somewhere that says enough is enough with these drug dealers. But on top of that, we also need large scale awareness. That had we known about fentanyl, that we would have had him in the ER that night. If we understood what was happening, again, schools, the community, we're still being pushed this narrative of prescription drugs, and it's just not the case anymore. Alexander never tried a legitimate oxycodone. We know that now, that it was never a legitimate prescription. This isn't the days of somebody stealing grandma's pills and doling them out among their friends or selling them to other people. This is really scary, and it's incredibly urgent that something takes place. Great, we warn the drug dealers, let's do that. But we also need to warn families and everyday citizens like myself.
Amy Neville, who lost her son Alexander in this opioid crisis, and Richard Whitten, who covers crime for the LA Times. Thank you both so much for being here for this important story.
Thank you. Thank you very much for covering it.